I've always liked the idea of having a fish pond on our decking, but with small grandchildren and predatory birds, it was essential that it had a protective cover. Despite my best efforts, I could not either find a commercially available product that I liked or get someone to construct it for me. Now, despite having never welded before, with the inspiration of some images I found on the web, I decided that I would build it myself. I chose to use 5mm steel rod to construct the cover. I purchased a ring roller to roll the rods into the correct shape, and I purchased a basic MIG welding kit to assemble the cover. As with all the projects I do, I started with detailed drawings, and in this case it included the various layers of pots. Some were there for just support and others were there for particular plants that I'd chosen, and they needed to be set at various depths. The first job was to roll the small ring that forms the top of the dome. I want to bend this piece of 6mm rod into a circle. I found the minimum circle size and I'm trying to make it to that. Extra 50mm on each end, because when it's rolled it seems to leave that bit straight, so I'm going to have that to cut off once I've finished rolling. I've put little marks on here so that I know where the centre of the rolling is, so that when I put it through multiple times I can go back and put it in exactly the same point. I also try to keep it, it can tend to move around in the machine, so I try to keep it so that it's in line. Now that's true once, and then what you do is you tighten down on this screw, put it in again. Now you may notice that I've got a bit of a tremor. Don't panic, I'm not about to have a heart attack. It's called the Benign Essential Tremor. It won't kill me, but it does make life a little difficult. That's now been through 3 times. And I'm just going to continue that process until I get it down to this size. It's now time to cut off those 2 end pieces to get the flat ends off it. Now I've cut the ends off that ring, and now I'm going to put it through several more times, tightening down each time so the circle gets smaller and smaller. And I think this will be the last time through. And it's called the manual section rolling machine. And so there's the minimum ring made, and I'm just going to have to squeeze that together and weld it up. I've got the rolled section ready for welding. I won't film that. I don't know what it'll do to my camera. That's the ring welded, and given that I only started welding today, it's not a bad job. So there's the top ring done. I've given it a bit of a clean up, and I'll now get on with the rest of the project. Now I'm just going to roll the 3 metre lengths of rod into a full circle, and that'll match the dome of the fish cover. Okay, so here we go. As you can see, the rod's getting a bit of a curve in it. I possibly could have tightened it up a bit more, but nonetheless, we'll see how we go. This is only the first time through. As you can see, we're working with the limitations of the garage. Right, now that's once through. I'm not sure whether or not you're supposed to run it through backwards, but I'm going to give it a try. Once again, trying to keep these vertical to make sure that I don't get any distortions. Okay, so there you go. That's the first one done. 5 to go to make up the dome. You may notice that there are 2 slightly straight sections at the ends of these rods, and if you want to make them a neater circle, you need to nip those off. I rolled the outside ring from the steel and it came just short of 1 metre, which is perfect for sitting on top of the pond. I then rolled a second piece to the same dimension, or a little bit tighter, and then I welded that, held in position on this board with a few nails, and then I just tack welded it into place. So now that will be the base of the pond cover. Because the base is made up with 2 concentric circles of rod, it's got a nice groove in the centre of it for positioning the dome shape. So I'm grinding the ends of the dome-shaped rods to a point so that they fit in the position there and make it easier for me to weld. Gloves and goggles on. After having found the 30-degree point on here and then checked it by measuring, I then placed the ruler across through this centre nail and established the position on the other side and marked that, and I've done that same thing there, and I'm about to do the same thing at the bottom here. The first part of the dome is now welded in place, and I'm going to take it out the back and check it on top of the pond. I was troubled by the shape of the final dome being half of a circle, and it just didn't look quite right to me. I discovered that if all I did was just trim one end of the circle that I already have in place, that it would be what I think is a much more pleasant shape. Okay, so having cut that piece down and put it in place, I'm happier with that as a design feature. Now what I need to do is I'm going to fit a ring into the centre that all these pieces will weld to. I'm going to set up a jig here to mount the wire so that I get the curvature just right. I'm going to set it up so that the ring sits outside the base of this. I'll then be able to cut the centre section out, and that can be then welded to the ring. I've found the centre of the arc. I've drilled a hole in my ruler. I've put in my guide screws so that I can make sure that the dome actually fits neatly up against the edge. It's sticking out over the edge so that when I cut it I can weld this in situ. And I've checked to make sure that the curve aligns with the base curve, just to make sure. Measure twice, cut once. With the arch mounted in the correct curve, I've got the mark for where I have to cut it off for the centre circle. I've cut the centre out of the rod, and I've now positioned the ring so that that's exactly in the middle of the circle. I'm holding in place with magnets. Now I'm going to tack weld these, and that'll be the part of the first dome. So now that the top ring is welded in place on the first arc, we'll now work on the other ones. That's the first ring in place for on top of the dome. For the second arch, I've mounted it with a block that I've screwed here, and I've clamped it in place, lined these up so that it's very easy to weld. I've now welded 2 more dome legs in place, these ones here. That's the last of the full arches to go in. I'm just going to finish off the welds, give it a bit of a clean up, and then I'm going to put in ones between here because this is still too wide for little children. They can get their heads in through that. Now this has been rolled to 720, and I want it to 520. Now that's 470. I've overshot a bit, but in my case that doesn't matter. I've managed to tack weld the lower ring into position. I can now free it up from the baseboard so that I can get around it and clean up the welds that I've done. I do have a bit of a tremor, which makes it very difficult holding one of these, but I use a lot of rests to hold it in place. The reason I've said that is, I've got this benign essential tremor, makes it difficult, but nonetheless, it's still worth having a go. I've now got these pieces that I've rolled and cut the length with a V shape on the bottom so that it'll sit in the groove at the base, and I've rounded the end off. I've got a couple of these magnetic holders that hold it in place so that I can tack it in, and I'll go round and put one between each of these domes. After rolling all these to close enough to the same diameter, there's still some variation amongst them because of the settings on the roller machine, and the end result is that you get some of them that aren't the same curve. That's no problem. Right, so here's two rods with different curvature. They don't quite fit the curve of the already installed rods. So in the case of this one, it needs to be bent out a little bit. And all I've done is just put it on the bench, give it a bit of a tweak, pop it up in position, and that's good enough for me. So I've put in the intermediate bars here, leaves a bit over 10 centimetres here, which I think is enough to keep the children out, and they all curve through to the centrepiece like this. There's a better view of the central element. I need to do a bit of buffing up on some of these rough welds, but nonetheless I think it's a pretty good job. First go at welding, and I'm pretty pleased with myself. Pond cover's complete except for some decorative bits and some hooks just put under the lip to keep it in place, but otherwise it's a bit of paint and job done. I was happy with the design of the pond, but my choice of plants wasn't as successful. All three of the plants die back during the winter or hibernate, and it leaves a very unattractive looking pond during the winter months. They were also affected badly by a frost and hail. I'm hoping to be able to get some replacement plants that will be attractive year round and are a bit more tolerant to the frost.